So remember, pain is about danger. If the brain gets a sense that that you are in danger, it will set off threat responses, one of which is pain. And as we know, anything that increases a sense of danger can increase pain, and anything that decreases a sense of danger can decrease pain. The body is one way our brain gets to know if we're safe or not. So when the body's already having that threat response, it can really be advantageous to try a body-based approach. Hi, everyone. My name's Michelle, and I am going to be talking today about bottom-up healing. What is bottom-up healing? What does a body-first approach to healing really even mean? We're going to try to break this down a little bit, and then we're going to practice and play around with it. So this is an image describing the triune brain, which is a way to explain the way the mind and body are connected. If you really talk to a neuroscientist now, because this was created in the 1960s, they would probably say, wow, that is way oversimplified. So there's a lot of complexity to the brain, but this is still a really applicable way of thinking about how the brain works. So what this posits is that there are three parts to the brain. This outer part here, that's kind of more blue colored, this is more the cognitive processing part of the brain. So this is where we have the capacity to conceptualize, reason, make meaning, problem solve. Decision-making happens here, the ability to weigh out different possibilities and what action we might take, and making a plan for accomplishing a goal, evaluating the outcome of those actions. This is all that really cognitive processing part. The next level down that they're talking about in this framework is this orange section, which is more connected to the emotional brain. So this is our limbic system, if you've heard that term before. It's about managing emotions. So I think of emotions as the motivational coloring to our cognitive processing. And they can act as a signal that direct us to notice certain things or attend to certain things. And they also direct us towards experiences we seek. And then kind of how it's connected to the cognitive brain then figures out how to get us there as intelligently as possible. And then the next layer down, that's green here and titled reptilian. This is more the brainstem. This is more the somatosensory component. So somatosensory means things like our fixed responses, like reflexes, heart rate, breathing. If you've heard of things like the fight or flight response, that would be kind of led by this part of the brain. It's connected to the way we experience our inner body, so what we get through inner body sensations, and then the five sense perceptions: sight, smell, sound, touch, taste, movement. And the thing about this system, unlike the cognitive part of the brain in this model, is that it's really fast and it's not really well thought out. So it's meant to be really fast so that we can respond in a quick way to threats. But it also usually means it comes from habit. So it's something we probably learned at a young age, maybe through our attachment behaviors or through experiences we had as children, where they're kind of learned before we really have cortical control. And then it becomes this kind of habit where we can enact it really fast, and it can happen before thought. And so that's kind of how this part of the brain functions. So to kind of bring that together, or like an easier way of looking at that, is we've got thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and sensations. Thoughts are what we'd call kind of the higher brain centers, and then we move down into that somatosensory component, which is more about sensations and behaviors. Again, this is an overly simplified way of thinking about it, but it is a really useful framework for understanding the connection then between the thoughts we have, our emotions, and what we experience in our bodies. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about top-down processing and top-down healing, just because I often find this feels a little bit more intuitive. So top-down processing is saying that cognition can be used to affect the lower levels, the lower brain centers. So you think of something, or you change the way you're thinking about something, and it likely could change your emotions and your behaviors. One way of saying that is when you think about someone you love, you might feel happy and then you smile. The way this shows up in top-down healing is things like cognitive behavior therapy, for example, where we might reframe a thought. You might notice how your emotions settle, and so does your body. You might be doing some cognitive reassurance, like, hey, I know I'm safe. I know this symptom is not dangerous in my body. You might notice, oh yeah, my emotions just shifted. And now my body feels more relaxed too. So then that brings us to bottom up. So bottom up processing, as you might be guessing, is when we engage with behaviors and sensations, or those kind of automatic responses that are happening in our body that are really fast. And that can shift emotions and thoughts. And so it's just the other way. We're starting from the bottom and working our way up. The reason I find this really impactful is because oftentimes these behaviors and sensations are happening kind of without us noticing them because they happen so quick. And so sometimes it happens so quick that we might not even really notice it until we notice like a repetitive thought we're used to noticing we're having, or movements happening in our body, or we start to notice an emotion is arising. And usually that's because this other stuff that's happening down lower in that somatosensory component has already kind of tipped it off and has already begun. And then the emotions and the thoughts follow. So an example of how this might show up for me, for example, is the last time I went to see my doctor. Just even talking about seeing my doctor now, I notice my heart rate rises a little bit, and I start to hold my breath a little bit, and I fidget. I start to kind of fidget in my legs a little bit. So this is what's already happening. Like, I know my doctor's safe. I know they're actually there to help me. I can talk myself into that kind of, but my body's already still having a response. And it's because I've had some really hard experiences with doctors in the past, and actually in the more recent past, that have impacted that as well. So my heart rate starts to rise. I start to notice I'm holding my breath. I generally feel apprehension and a little bit of fear. And then I start thinking, they're going to tell me something's really wrong with my body. There must be something really wrong. And this is kind of what happens that really starts in the body for me, even though I know that they're there to help me. And I know actually that I can get through hard things, right? Those things can't really like come in because I'm kind of being driven by the somatosensory component. And so here today, what we're talking about is, let's actually interact with the behavior sensation aspect of your being and see how it can also shift other aspects of your being. That's what we mean when we're talking about bottom-up healing. When we're talking about top-down, we're talking about how the mind initiates a change in the body. And when we're talking about bottom-up, we're talking about how the body initiates a change in the mind. So let's relate this then to pain, which is why we're all here, or chronic symptoms, which is why we're all here. So remember, pain is about danger. And even as I have this picture up, I recognize how it can feel a little alarming with all the red. But it is kind of like a smoke alarm, right? It goes off when our system thinks we're in danger. And no matter where that information is coming from, if the brain gets a sense that that you are in danger, it will set off threat responses, one of which is pain. And as we know, anything that increases a sense of danger can increase pain, and anything that decreases a sense of danger can decrease pain. And so here we are, we're talking about how the body is one way our brain gets to know if we're safe or not. And that body experience can sometimes happen so fast that we don't really get to use our smart, witty brains to control it, right? Or to stop it from happening. So I like to bring up these pictures. Just take a moment to notice what it's like to look at this image. I'm not as afraid of heights, but if you are, you might notice right away that there's a little shift in your body. And even in this moment, I'll invite you to get curious about what that shift is like. Because what we take in through our senses and experience in our bodies is often highly impactful. And so if you are one of those people out there that's scared of heights, you might have noticed immediate response in your body. Your body's already getting ready for the threat that it sees through this image. And that can then affect the way you feel, the emotions, and the way you think. And this is part of what your brain gets information on, and it can happen so fast. So for me, this one isn't it, but this one, every time I look at this picture, I have a threat response in my body. Now, it's not huge, but gosh, do I feel the tightening in my chest. And I have this immediate feeling like I need to get away from that thing. If I saw that in my room right now, this conversation would be over, right? Like I would be out of here. And I can feel that in my body. I can feel the beginning of that energy surge of like the heebie-jeebie energy surge of I got to get out of here. And this is even with me knowing, hey, this is just an image. There's actually no spider, but I find myself thinking, but what if there is a spider in here, right? So that kind of shows my system that is kind of doing bottom up processing, right? This is starting from the body, had a really quick response. I'm already in it. I'm thinking about how I need to get out of here. And I'm actually thinking like, even if this isn't real, there probably is one. And maybe it's going to drop from the ceiling onto my shoulder while I'm giving this talk. Right. So this is what happens. And I think this is something that we can sometimes miss because it happens so fast that we don't even really notice it's happening until we notice maybe the emotion. But oftentimes it's that we notice the thoughts, right? Like the thoughts become really apparent. And so we might try to engage on the thought side, but there's so much happening in the body already that that's actually kind of leading the experience and it doesn't feel as effective. And so this is then the next image that I like to show when I'm talking about this type of approach to healing, which is that it's hard to convince yourself to calm down by just telling yourself to calm down. Some of you out there might resonate with this, right? Where we try to tell ourselves we're safe, but gosh, we don't feel it. We don't feel safe. And that's exactly the time when it can be really helpful to try a body-based approach. It's going to feel a little less intuitive, right? Because we might really hear the thoughts really big. And so we think, okay, I need to contend with these. I need to work with the thoughts. But sometimes they're being driven so much by the lower level, that somatosensory part, that we actually don't find we can shift them as well. We can't shift our state as much by just working with the thoughts. So when the body's already having that threat response, it can really be advantageous to engage with and shift the inputs, kind of what's coming in through our senses, or offer support to shift those responses that are already happening. And that can have sometimes a more effective and pretty big impact on how much threat your system is perceiving. And as we know from what we know about pain, right, that can have a really big effect on what our contributors to pain are. One of the general approaches I think is a really important place to start when we're thinking about bottom-up approach or bottom-up healing is moving towards more safety in your body as a sensation, as a feeling, as an experience. First thing I want to point out here is I don't say moving or creating safety. And I know we are wanting to create safety, but the point I'm trying to make here is we don't sometimes get all the way to safety. Sometimes it's more, I'm feeling a lot of fear in my body or a lot of activation in my body, or discomfort is another way you might say it. And when I do this thing, then like do a breath practice, or when I sit back in my chair, or when I move with breath, I feel a little bit more safety. I still don't feel totally okay, but I feel more okay. And so that's really an important point here. We're looking for kind of relative safety or shifts towards safety. And at the most basic level, because sometimes those words don't totally land, we're looking for a little bit more okayness. Like, okay, like I'm a little bit scared, but I can also sense that I'm okay. Right. So for example, with the spider, I might look around first, say, okay, I can't see any spiders. Okay, right now there's actually not a spider. And then I might sit back in my chair and notice how my body can be supported. And right away, the energy comes a little bit less out of my head, and I start to feel a little bit more calmness arrive in my body. So this is one of the first kind of general concepts, and we're going to practice with it. You can be standing, sitting, lying, but I will invite you first to just get comfortable. And sometimes what that means is taking a break from the screen or looking away. And I'll have you start by just noticing your breath. So sometimes in noticing it already changes, but as you settle in, we'll take a few more breaths. Just see if you can just let the breath move of its own accord. We're not trying to change the breath at this moment. Just noticing the breath. And now I'll invite you to notice the inhales. And again, sometimes when we first start noticing, we'll change the inhales, and that's fine, but also just allow some time so the inhales can keep kind of going of their own accord. We're not trying to change the breath by any means at this point. Just notice what it's like to feel the inhales. The inhales can be a little bit more invigorating or stimulating. There's often even a gentle increase in the heart rate when your breath comes in. The inhale is a little bit sympathetic if you've come across that term before. It's just a little bit more stimulating. And so just notice how that is for you today. And then I'll have you shift, and I'll invite you here to notice the exhales. Now, the exhales can be more down regulating, or calming is another way to describe that. Always. Or sometimes that calming can even feel like a little bit of like stuckness, or might not feel pleasant, and that's okay. We're just getting curious about how the exhales feel for you, and just notice the exhales. There might be a softening of the body with the exhales, or a letting go. Okay, and now I'm going to invite you to lean into the part of the breath that feels most supportive for you today. Now, sometimes we'll get really cognitive about that, like, well, Michelle said this about the inhales, and so it should be this one, right? But let's actually just notice your body. What part of the breath does it feel supportive to be with? It could be the inhale, it could be the exhale, it could be the balance of both, noticing the balance of both. So notice the part of the breath that feels most supportive. We'll take 2 or 3 more breaths this way. And then find your way out of the practice. You might slowly open your eyes again if they were closed. And we'll come back together. So for some of you out there, it might be that the inhale felt really supportive, energizing, kind of helping you move a little bit more energy in your body, less stuck feeling. Sometimes it can feel activating, or can kind of make anxiety feel a little bit worse. And some of you out there might have found the exhale is more supportive, felt really relaxing, calming, letting go, more ease. And other times, again, it can make people feel a little bit more stuck. And so this is just the beginning of recognizing, like, whoa, if I pay attention to something in my body or shift it, I can also then shift my experience. Like, this is how I can support myself. And if this is a new concept to you, I'd encourage you to come back to this practice and try it again. This is the beginning of practicing or playing around with shifting towards a little bit more safety or a little more okayness in your body. Okay, so what might this look like? What are other practices, right? So bottom-up healing, when we're moving towards more safety in your body, might look like what we just did, balanced breathing, or leaning into the part of the breath that feels most supportive, grounding, centering, deep breathing, movement or movement matched to breath, or mindful movement like yoga or qigong, sound, vibration, progressive muscle relaxations where you tighten and then relax, yoga nidra, softening the eyes, softening the tongue, Orienting, which is noticing what's around you, right? Taking in through your senses in your present moment. And connection with self, others, spirit, right? So this is the kind of thing where we bring things in through that somatosensory level of experience, which is through our five senses, through what we're noticing in our bodies. And this then shows the brain that we're safe, right? Oh, Michelle's breathing gently. She must be okay. Or, oh, Michelle's lower body is calm and grounded. She must be okay. Orienting is, oh, Michelle's currently in a safe place. There must be safety here, right? Or connection, right? There are people around me who don't feel scared or don't seem scared. Maybe I'm safe, right? So this is how we can start to offer evidence to the brain through our experience that we're safe, instead of trying to kind of like cognitively push our brain to convince it it's safe. So hopefully that feels a little bit more clear. Okay, this is then the second concept that I wanted to bring up, kind of a general approach with bottom-up healing, is it can be a nice way for us to get to know when danger is rising. And so, when do I get the first inkling that I'm in danger? What's the first clue in my body? How's my body telling me that I'm in danger? And getting to know what is happening is really the first step that then allows you to then experiment with offering something that can support a shift to more safety. So this is going to be our last practice. It'll be a short one. So what I'm going to have you do, look around your space and find something in your space that you like. And start to look at that thing, and as you gaze at it, just notice what happens in your body. And it's okay if you're not sure or you don't notice anything specifically changes. It's okay. Just get a sense for what it's like. And then I'm going to ask you to find something in your space you don't like. So it might be something like, ugh, I wish this weren't here. I don't like the color of that, or I've been meaning to get rid of that, but I just haven't been able to do it. Or, look at something you don't like. And notice what happens when you look at that thing. And then we'll go back and forth one more time. So now look back at the thing you like and notice if anything shifts in what you're noticing inside. And then we'll go one more time to the thing you don't like and notice what shifts. And just so we don't end with that, go back to the thing you like. And notice what happens inside. Okay, and then we'll come back together. So I just want to say, this can be really subtle, but hopefully some of you out there noticed a little thing different. Something felt a little different. And for me, some of the things in my space that I like, I was practicing with this before I started the talk. There's a stained glass in my space that I really like. And then I looked at this bowl that I don't like. I don't like that it's here. I've been wanting to get new bowls. It was given to us by someone that I wish I kind of had a little bit more space from. There's some associations, right? And when I noticed that bowl, I just felt this subtle tightening in my chest, and my breath stopped a little bit. And these can be really impactful ways for us to start to get to know when threat is starting to arise, right? Or when there's a little bit more danger here. And I want to say this too. What the neuroscience of pain tells us is that pain is actually the last thing that shows up when we're in danger. And so what that means is a bunch of other things showed up first that were telling us we're in danger, but we kind of just skipped over them. Or, we used our cognitive brains to say, hey, that's not that important. It's not that big of a deal, right? And at some point then, if it is a big enough deal, it gets bigger and bigger. might get more big in sensation, and ultimately it might turn into pain. So this can be a really, really interesting part or impactful part to get engaged with as we're starting with bottom-up approaches, which is, how do I know when like the, I don't like that started to show up? What's that like in my body? And what if I attend to that and start to engage with that? Well, that's when we can start to shift things. So this is, again, where different practices arise. This is sometimes done a little bit better in one-on-one work with a somatic-based therapist, but it's definitely something you can engage with or experiment with on your own too. But we start to get curious about the discomfort. And so let me first say this. When I say discomfort, I'm not talking about pain. And I know that might seem a little counterintuitive because we're here talking about pain. But again, there's all these things that usually happen first or happen other than that start to give us clues. And by the time it gets to pain, sometimes it's so generalized or so big that we can't actually engage with it in a way where we get clues. Sometimes we can, but not always. And so if you're one of those people out there that when you start to engage with sensation in your body, the main thing you notice is pain, I'll offer you this. One, what else is there? See if you can kind of notice if there's anything else. And the other thing you might do too is say, hey, pain, I know you're here for a reason. What is that, right? Like, what is the message? So try not to be too hard on yourself about that. If pain's the first thing you notice, you might get curious, what else is here? Or you might make sure you stay away from that at first. Like, I'm not going to go towards the pain yet. I'm going to notice other things that are happening. So bottom-up healing, when we're getting to know when danger is arising, could look like these things. Getting curious about discomfort, getting to know it as a sensation, what happens when I look at the thing I don't like, what happens next. If this were an emotion, what might it be? What thoughts arise? What's the impulse in my body? What is my body wanting to do? Like with the spider, I was wanting to get away, right? There was an immediate impulse to draw back. You could get curious about, is this familiar to you? Like, oh, wow, yeah, I remember this from when I was young. This used to be the way I dealt with this, a similar situation. And then we practice offering support that might shift the physical experience. Okay, so I want to present kind of two missteps that can happen in bottom-up healing. One is that if I'm doing this right, I should feel great all the time. I first came across this in yoga, where people kind of talk about yoga bliss and like, oh, if I'm so good at yoga, I should just be blissed out all the time. And I just want to say first, like, the easiest way to answer this is like, this is a completely unrealistic expectation. Like, that's not what it is to be human, right? It's just not. We feel hard things. And having this as a goal often means we're so focused on trying to feel good all the time that we miss the fact that our discomfort is often telling us something important. And I'll often relate this to hunger. Like, if we kept suppressing hunger and saying, I just need to make it feel better, I just need to make it feel better, like I need to ignore it, or I need to notice how I feel better in other parts of my body, we would actually miss that we're hungry and we wouldn't eat, which we actually need to survive. So to a certain extent, like, this isn't about feeling good all the time. Instead, what it's about is offering support at the level of the body. What if I take more long exhales and it helps me feel calmer and safer? Okay, now I can feel that a little bit more. There is some discomfort, but I actually can get the message because I'm feeling a little bit more supported. It also looks like finding your way back to safety. Like, hey, I had this argument. I had to stand up for myself. I feel really kind of activated right now. That argument's over. Now I can feel my feet. Oh, okay, now my body's relaxing. Okay, I'm actually coming down from that now. Like, I can feel safety returning in my body. This is a really important part of how we support ourselves with body-based approaches. And ultimately, it supports flexibility, which is what we're going for, right? We're not looking to feel good all the time. We're looking to find our way back to safety, giving ourselves breaks from activation. Activation is needed. It's here because it's a survival response, which means it helps us survive. That means it's important, right? But we also want to find ways to support ourselves with that so we're not overwhelmed by it all the time and find our way back into safety. So that's what bottom-up healing really looks like. The other one is that if I'm doing this right, I should be able to handle anything. And again, I just want to say, just flat out, this is an unrealistic expectation. Humans can't do everything. We can't. There are just things that we actually need help with or need support with. We can't accomplish everything. This ends up being just another way we end up being hard on ourselves. And so I really want to caution you on that. This is more about self-care. This is about noticing what's happening in the body and offering space, time, and support to essentially practice self-compassion from a body perspective. Oh, my body's having a hard time right now. What can I do to support my body? This is a totally human thing that my body's having a hard time. What can I do to support? And if anything else, I wanted to leave us with this. I've learned about self-compassion a lot of different ways from a lot of different teachers. And in my most recent training, they were talking about a study where they showed people images like this of cute little animals and little puppies and kittens, and how it kind of naturally invoked a sense of self-compassion, of empathy, and this natural desire to nurture and provide care. And so when you look at this, just take a moment to notice what happens in your body. And if you can approach yourself in this way as you explore bottom-up healing, I know you'll be successful. Treat this as nurturing care, and I know it will help.